All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name's Joe Gorowski. For those who don't know, we're all about bringing science, adventure, and conservation to classrooms across North America. Today's Hangout, for those who are joining and watching live, might not know, it was meant to be a SANCCOB Hangout talking about South African penguins, but unfortunately we had to postpone, so we'll reschedule that one. But instead today I'm going to talk about an expedition that I just got back from to the Galapagos. So for those who don't know, I was selected as a Grosvenor Teacher Fellowship by National Geographic and Lindblad Expeditions. So each year they offer professional development opportunities for teachers across North America who are opening up their classrooms to the world through geography, through science, in unique ways. So I applied last December and was selected with 30 other teachers from around North America. And then we're sent out on expeditions around the world with Lindblad and Nat Geo, and we bring our experiences back to share with classrooms and our community. So some teachers went to Antarctica, some to the Arctic, others to the British Isles, and I was lucky enough to be selected for the Galapagos. So let's see, I've been back for about a week and a half now, so I spent 10 days in the Galapagos. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you some pictures and videos from my time there, the 10 days on expedition. So we have all the classes here joining us today, 7 in total from across North America. Our last classroom just joined us, Mrs. Hoole's classroom. And do you mind, Mrs. Hoole, just moving your microphone for me? Unfortunately, yours is just off screen, so I can't reach the mute button. So if you don't mind muting for me and then turning it back on when it's time for the questions. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. It's just going to take a moment to pop up. And we'll start showing you a little bit from my trip to the Galapagos. All right. So let me just turn on a microphone to test here. Mrs. Patterson's class, can you see my screen when I bring up this map?
Yes, we can.
Beautiful. All right, we're ready to go. Okay, so if you don't know, the Galapagos are located in South America, and they're part of the country of Ecuador. So if you see where I have my cursor, there's Ecuador on the Pacific. And then right on the equator, about 500 to 600 miles off the coast, is a tiny collection of islands called the Galapagos. And these islands were formed over a hotspot in the Pacific. So molten rock and lava flowing from the sea floor built up over thousands and thousands of years to form this little archipelago of islands. And as you look at this, if you look here, oops, here to the east, this is the older islands, and here to the west is the newer islands. So Fernandina and Isabella are very active. In fact, Wolf Volcano, I believe last year, erupted. So we flew into this island here, Baltra, also known as South Seymour, and boarded the National Geographic Endeavour. I'll show you guys a picture of the boat in a moment. We spent time on North Seymour, which is a tiny island. You can't see it. It's right here where my cursor is. From there, we went to Rabida and North Seymour. We then went around Isabella to Fernandina, the youngest island, and then spent some time on Isabella, 2 days actually on Isabella, and then back to Santiago. Then we spent time on Santa Cruz, and then back to San Cristobal. And this is where we flew back to Ecuador from. So what I'd like to do is show you some pictures and video from some of those islands so you can see just how unique and amazing they are. Even though this whole archipelago of islands is only just over 100 miles across, you find all kinds of unique species, not only to the Galapagos Islands, and you also see that each island looks very different from the other. So let's take a look. So this is the ship I told you about. This is the National Geographic Endeavour. And this was my home for 8 days while we went island hopping in the Galapagos. So it's an expedition ship. Along the side, you can see that there's zodiacs. Okay, they're usually stored at the back. But these zodiacs allowed us to quickly get off the ship, to go snorkeling, to hike on the islands, and even to go kayaking. And so this ship held 90 people in total. This is North Seymour. And North Seymour is a really cool island for birds. So this here is a blue-footed booby, and you can see that it has 2 chicks that it's raising. Okay, and the parents take turns going out to find food, fish to bring back, and then feed to the young. So you can see these chicks are fledging right now. So they've got their downy feathers, and eventually they'll lose those feathers and look more like the adult bird here. And you can see where they get their name from, these bright blue feet. And the bluer the feet, the more healthy the bird is. It means they're eating well, getting lots of good food. And it was really neat because in the Galapagos, you can get really close to the animals. They evolved with humans out of the picture, so they don't view us as predators. And you can actually just sit and watch them do their natural behavior really, really close up. So this is a male blue-footed booby, and he's trying to get the attention of a female. So she's just off camera, but he's showing off right now. He's doing a little dance. He's showing her his blue feet. He's trying to impress her to say, look at these feet. Look how blue they are. I get lots of good food. If you stick with me, we'll raise some good chicks together. And then another part of the dance is the sky pointing. So the male bird will lift his tail, lift his wings, point up with his beak to the sky, and he'll call out. So that's another way he tries to impress the female, with sky pointing. And then this is a frigate bird, a magnificent frigate bird, in fact. And so the males can fill these big red pouches with air, and they keep them inflated for days. And the reason they do that is 2 reasons. One is to show off to females, to attract their attention, show them how big and strong they are and how colorful their pouch is. And they also display to show other males, this is my territory, stay out. So it's really neat to watch these birds displaying. And sometimes they'd fly over with the big pouch inflated and look like they were carrying a big watermelon underneath them. It was kind of funny to see. And then also on North Seymour, we saw our first land iguanas. So these guys are really neat. They have a little territory, and it usually has a big prickly pear cactus in it, and that's their food source. So they protect their territory, and then they also, from time to time, take bites out of their prickly pear cactus. And you can see one example here. You can see where it's taken 2 little cookie cutter bites out of its cactus, and that's its food source. And they're very territorial. We actually saw some fights between 2 males on another island who stumbled into each other's territory. From there, we went to a beautiful island called Rabida. And Rabida is a beautiful red color. You can see these rocks. And that's due to the iron in the rocks. So basically, this island's rusting. The rocks and the iron within have been exposed to the elements. And yeah, you've got this beautiful red color of the volcanic rocks, this rust color. And we did some snorkeling on Rabida. So one thing about the Galapagos is there's no shortage of Pacific green sea turtles. I'd even go as far as to say it's infested with sea turtles. On some snorkels, I could look around and see 10, 11 sea turtles around me. And you can see what they're there for. That green algae on the rocks is a perfect food source for them. They just love it. So you can see another one there. It's having a little munch on the green rocks. And then there's all kinds of other cool things to see. Like this is a chocolate chip starfish. And I think you can probably see how it got its name of a chocolate chip starfish. And then before we move on, I'm going to take a little pause here and I'm going to show you guys a little video. So another thing that I really enjoyed about being in the Galapagos was the Galapagos sea lions. And pretty much every dive you could expect to encounter some young ones, very playful, who would swim all around. So we're going to watch a little bit of this video, and then it's set to some music as well. And this music's by a local group in the Galapagos. So this is a little music that goes with it. You can see they're very, very fast. They're very curious, very playful. And just when you think they've gone, they'll come popping back out. All right, so if you'd like to see more of that video, it is up on our YouTube page on the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants page. So we'll jump back into our slideshow now. This is on Rabida again. We went for a hike after our snorkel, and this is a pair of Galapagos mockingbirds, and there's 4 species of mockingbirds in the Galapagos. And on all of the islands are these beautifully colored Sally Lightfoot crabs. And most beaches, the crabs run away pretty quickly, but these guys stick around, let you take some nice pictures. Bright red, bright yellow, and their eyes are a really neat purple color. And then the marine iguanas. So this is Fernandina now. This is the youngest island in the Galapagos. And there were hundreds and hundreds of marine iguanas sunning themselves on the island. And they're pretty unique. They're the only iguana that can go into the ocean. And that's where they get their food. They look for algae and seaweed on the rocks. They can dive down for several minutes and then eat off the rocks. But eventually they have to come back out and warm up on the hot lava rock. Otherwise, their body temperature gets too cold. You can see another one there, just enjoying the sun. He looks pretty happy. And then this is what they're eating. This is kind of like a buffet line. So there was so much algae and seaweed growing on the rocks that these guys didn't even have to dive down. They could eat right off the rocks, right on the surface. And then here's a view looking at some of the volcanic island. This is Isabella in the background, and I'm on Fernandina. And you can see in between the 2 islands is our ship, the National Geographic Endeavour. And these guys are really cool. These are cormorants, but they're pretty unique. They're flightless cormorants. So they made their way to the islands, and with no natural predators, they didn't need to put so much energy into the development of their wings, and they can no longer fly. But underwater, they're incredibly graceful, diving deep to catch fish. And what this guy's doing is he's bringing a gift to his mate. So he's found some seaweed. He thinks it looks pretty good. You can see he walks over and drops it down at the nest. So there's his mate, and there's 2 chicks on this nest. And so now he's sunning himself. He's warming back up. She's going to go back into the water to look for food. And then here on the left, you can see there's 1 chick, and the other one's just tucked in behind. You can see its butt kind of sticking out right there. So it's neat to watch them doing their thing. And you can see they have beautiful blue eyes. And then here's Isabella. So Isabella is the largest island. It's a chain of 6 volcanoes that formed together to form one big seahorse-shaped island. And there's another view of Isabella. We went for a beautiful hike on Isabella. You can see we're on the top of what's called a parasitic volcano that's filled with water in the middle of the crater. And then in the distance, you can see the National Geographic Endeavour again. On another part of Isabella, we came across our first Galapagos tortoises. And as you can see, they're quite large. And if you lay on the ground very still, they'll walk right past you. So you can see I'm up here with my camera, and someone took a picture of me with the tortoise. And here's what I was taking a picture of. So there's the tortoise coming closer, and I almost got run over in slow motion. Eventually, I had to roll out of the way because I don't think he would have stopped. More land iguanas on Isabella. You can see these guys are a little more colorful. And then the Galapagos hawk. So this is the main predator in the Galapagos hawk on land. And so they'll hunt things like small lizards, even marine iguanas when they're looking for food. This is Santiago. So we had a wet landing on the beach with the Zodiacs. You can see it's a beautiful beach. We had a beautiful hike up to the top of a ridge and another view over a little lagoon and out back into the ocean. And as we were getting ready to go back to the boat, a beautiful rainbow formed right over top. It seemed to go from the back of the ship and then across the ocean. So that was pretty cool to see. We also went snorkeling later in the day, and they had a glass bottom boat. So I was showing off a little bit under the glass bottom boat, but I wasn't paying attention to how close I was to the bottom. And I actually hit my shoulder on the reef, which is pretty sharp rock. So you can see I had to have a little visit to the ship's doctor just to make sure it was cleaned out so there'd be no infection. This is Santiago as well. This is a male lava lizard, and he's kind of showing off on a little rock. And then here's one of the females. So you can see she's got the brighter orange colors. It's also neat to sit and watch the sea lions. So sometimes they're pretty curious. They look back at you. Sometimes they're busy fighting with each other. And sometimes you've got a mother just hanging out with her little ones. So this pup's probably about a week and a half old. And you can see he's pretty busy having a drink of milk there. Now back to marine iguanas. Marine iguanas do something pretty cool. They eat a lot of algae out of the water, which puts a lot of salt in their system, and they need a way to get rid of it. So they have special glands in their nose where the salt deposits, and then they sneeze to get the salt out of their body. So you can see this guy right here is mid-sneeze. You can see the probably a little bit of mucus and salt and water getting blasted right out his nose, and in the next frame, it's spraying all over the other ones in the rocks. So he's getting the salt out of his body. The next day we're on Santa Cruz, and this is the biggest town in the Galapagos, Porto Ayora, and it's a pretty unique spot. It's the only place I've ever been where you go to a bank and you find a sea lion sleeping on the front steps. It's also home to the Charles Darwin Research Foundation, and this is an amazing place where they're all studying all parts of the island, and there's all kinds of conservation projects on the go where they're trying to get rid of invasive species, so species that we, men, brought to the island, which are doing a ton of damage to the ecosystem, and they're trying to get rid of invasive species and as well as breed native species to get their population numbers back up. So these are saddleback tortoises. You can see they've got long necks to reach leaves high off the ground, and their shells are raised at the front to accommodate those long necks so they can reach nice and high. We went up into the highlands, which was beautiful and green, and we're walking through fields and forests and photographing tortoises in the wild. So here's a tortoise having a snack. Here's one having a little soak, and you can see how big it is compared to this duck in the corner. They get the name giant tortoises for a reason. They're pretty big. And then here's another one in the forest just having a bite to eat. And so here's the last island we visited, San Cristobal. So we went for a hike up in kind of the foothills. You can see the beautiful view back. You can see some of the terrain we were crossing over on our hike. All three species of boobies can be found here. The blue-footed booby, this is a Nazca booby, and then this one here is a red-footed booby. So it's one of the only islands where all three can be found. And then this was neat to watch. So frigate birds are also called pirates because they don't actually get their own food from the water. They will look for other birds like the blue-footed booby, and they will harass them until they spit out or regurgitate the fish that they've eaten for their young. So this frigate bird, probably for about 20 minutes, was hovering over top of this blue-footed booby and its young, and it was trying to get the parent to regurgitate, to barf up the fish so it could have a meal. And so this went on for probably a good 20 minutes. And in the end, the frigate bird gave up. The two birds fought him off. And there's another shot of them doing battle over the fish. A shot of the Endeavour from San Cristobal. You can see the beautiful colors here. And the last beach we visited was absolutely stunning. Blue water, did some snorkeling, watched the pelicans diving, looking for food, catching fish. There's another shot of a diving pelican. All right, so as you can see, the Galapagos is an absolutely beautiful place. I've wanted to visit for pretty much as long as I can remember. So it was pretty amazing to have the opportunity to visit. So I'm going to bring it back to the main screen now, and we're going to visit each one of our classrooms, and we're going to steal some questions. So first, I'd like to visit Mrs. Diesel's class. So they're from Bradford, Ontario. They're a grade 2 classroom, and your microphone is on if you have a couple questions.
Okay. Riley, do you want to come and ask a question? One over here. Sorry, just give us a second.
That's okay.
Okay. So, yeah, that's where you are right there. So just stand. So just talk when you're ready. Just ask your question. Okay, it's about the trip to the Galapagos. Do you have any questions about the animals that were on the screen?
How did the birds with the blue feet, how did they get the blue feet?
How did the birds with the blue feet get the blue feet? So the blue-footed, what were they? Blue-footed booby. How did they get?
Right.
Stop.
That is pretty funny. That's a good question. So their feet, the bluer they are, the healthier they are. So if they're eating lots of fish and they're getting lots of good nutrients from the ocean, they'll have those nice blue feet. And actually, I didn't mention, watching them hunt is amazing. So they're flying big flocks, they're looking down for fish, and all at once they dive bomb. And at the last minute, they curl back their wings, they hit the water like little torpedoes, they snag the fish, they pop up like a cork, and then they fly away. And it's really funny to watch them try to take off because they're not very graceful. They kind of run along the top of the water before they can take off. Let's grab one more question if you have one.
Can you come back to us, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Let's jump over to Mrs. Jan and Mrs. Pam's grade 5 and 6, and they're joining us from Quebec today. And your microphone's on when you're ready.
Does anybody have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, Jeffrey, what's your question?
What?
Okay, I'll come back to you.
Form.
What?
How does saltwater form?
Oh, the saltwater form. We'll come back to you, Jeffrey. Just one sec. Felix,
Did any animals
you have to be loud and you have to speak to him.
Did any animals ever get the chance to in any way? Did they ever harm you or anything?
No. You can get really close because they're not afraid. If you're not careful, you could get maybe bumped over by a sea lion, but no, the sea lions get really big. They can be up to 400 pounds. So you don't want to swim with a big male who's protecting its territory, but they give you lots of warning first. They'll bark at you. They'll swim up into your face to try and get you to move away. But mostly the young ones like to come out and swim, and they're a ton of fun. And I'd say the closest I came to any danger was with that big tortoise, because it was on its way to go get some food, and it probably would have crawled right over me if I didn't move out of the way.
All right, Alexandra.
The
Yeah.
The red-footed booby. Is there any particular reason why it has red feet?
The naturalists didn't talk about that, but I'd imagine that just like the blue-footed booby, that the red feet can be very important in their display, and they're looking for a mate. So I'd assume that like the blue-footed booby, that the healthier ones are going to have the nice bright red feet, and that's going to be really appealing to its mate. All right. So thanks for the questions, guys. We're going to jump to our next classroom, and let's visit Mrs. Huddy's grade 2s in Calgary. Just give me a second to turn your microphone on. There we go.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so Whitney has a question. Whitney, you can come stand up for a little bit. Yeah, that's good.
What was your favorite animal to see?
Oh, that's a really good question, a really hard question. I've wanted to go for so long that there were a lot of animals I really wanted to see, like the marine iguana. I wanted to swim with the sea lions. I really wanted to see the giant tortoises. So if I had to pick my favorite out of all of those, I think it would have to be the tortoises. When you think about the Galapagos, you always think about the giant tortoises. And what's really unique is many of the islands had their own unique species. And unfortunately, due to overhunting by men, so ships used to come to the islands. There wasn't a lot of water available, but they learned that by taking tortoises, turning them upside down in the ship's hold, that they could be a source of food for months and months and months on their long voyages. So unfortunately, many species became endangered, and even some of the species on individual islands became extinct. So they're a symbol of conservation. They're a symbol of the Galapagos. So I think those were my favorite to see.
Awesome. I think we have one more, Hannah.
Where would you like to travel next?
Oh, that's another really hard question. Before the Galapagos, I really wanted to see Australia, and I was lucky and spent a year living in Australia. Now that I've been to the Galapagos, I think it's probably really close between the Amazon in Brazil and maybe Antarctica. I'd love to visit Antarctica. Good questions. Mr. Wright in Brights Grove, grades 7 and 8. I'm going to turn your microphone on, and you guys can ask a couple questions.
Yeah, but one question right here.
Why does the blue-footed booby chicks don't have blue feet?
Oh, that's a good question. So just like with their feathers, you saw that they had the kind of fuzzy downy feathers. They looked very different from their parents. So just like the feathers, it takes some time to grow. And as they get a bit older, they're going to fledge. So they're going to get the feathers more like the parents. And then from there, they'll start getting those characteristic blue feet too. And like we mentioned before, the better they eat, the healthier they are, and the bluer those feet are gonna become.
We have another quick little question there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your favorite island?
Oh, that's a tough one. They're all amazing islands, but I think the one I was looking forward to the most was Fernandina. So Fernandina is the youngest. It's also, it's basically a big shield volcano. They actually call them bowl volcanoes because it almost looks like an upside down bowl more than a shield. And what's unique about Fernandina is, a few hundred years ago, it was visited, but the sailors who visited weren't that interested because there wasn't a really good source of water. So Fernandina is actually a very well preserved, very I'm going to say the wildlife's a little more untouched than it is on the other islands. So walking along the coast, you'd look out over the water and you'd see the marine iguanas swimming out to get food. You'd see 10, 15 sea turtles bobbing in the water. The marine iguanas were amazing to watch on the beach, and the flightless cormorants, the sea lions swimming. It was just so alive and such a unique island. So Fernandina was my favorite out of all the islands. That's a really good question. Mrs. Hool, 6'7" from Sarnia, Ontario. I'm going to turn your microphone. Actually, you need to turn your microphone on for me, and you can ask a couple questions.
Did you pet any sea lions or tortoises?
Did I pet any?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I would have been in a lot of trouble if I did. So one of the amazing things about the Galapagos is how good of a job that Ecuador is doing protecting them and conserving them. So they're very careful. So as you're coming in, as you're landing in the Galapagos, the flight attendants walk down and spray down your bags to get rid of any bacteria or insects that might be in your bags. The naturalists are very careful to make sure that you stay on the paths. You're in small groups. You're to be 6 feet away from the animals at all times. And that's hard sometimes when the animals come to you. they're very, very careful to protect the islands because they are so unique to the world, and they're such an amazing natural laboratory for scientists to study. But I have heard stories of people who have been laying down to take pictures or sitting, and the sea lions will actually come and sit on their legs and things like that. So if the animal comes to you, it's a little bit different, but you want to keep your hands off the animals. But that's a good question. Yeah, the Galapagos Ecuador is doing an amazing job protecting those islands. It's actually a good model that other places around the world should be following too.
Did you use a GoPro for the underwater videotaping?
I did. I had a lot of different cameras. So I had my GoPro for underwater with underwater housing. I had another camera, a point and shoot camera for underwater as well. So I had 2 underwater cameras. I had a Nikon camera with a big lens for taking pictures on land. And then I had something really cool. If I had it with me, I'd show you. But it's called a Theta, and it's a 360 camera. So I could take pictures and video 100% 360. So I could put them in a Google Cardboard, and I could look around at the whole video. Same with the pictures. So I'm slowly posting some of those. So maybe in another week or 2, I'll have some of those up on the website, and you guys can see the 360 pictures and videos from the Galapagos. That's a good question. I had a lot of different camera gear to make sure I could take back as much as I could to share the experience. All right, Mrs. Houle, if you don't mind muting the mic again for me, and we'll visit Mrs. Langlaw's class. They're grade 6s from Sterling, Ontario. And I'll turn your microphone on. You guys can have the last questions.
So Parker first, what was your favorite thing doing at the Galapagos Islands?
Well, I'm a big scuba diver. I've been scuba diving for about 10 years now. So any chance that I could be in the ocean and snorkeling and free diving, that was my absolute favorite thing to do. So I've been a lot of cool places and got to see a lot of neat things underwater, but the Galapagos is really alive. Massive schools of fish. I've been diving in places where I saw 4 or 5 sea turtles and thought that was pretty cool. But in the Galapagos, on one dive, you could see 30 or more, especially along the coast of Isabela, where there was lots of algae on the rocks for them to eat. So snorkeling, we saw some white-tipped reef sharks. I got to watch the flightless cormorants working underwater and chasing fish. We saw some Galapagos penguins. I saw fur seals and sea lions. So the Galapagos is really unique because there's cold water currents that produce upwelling, which brings a lot of food to the surface. So sea lions and fur seals are usually never together. Fur seals are in colder climates, sea lions are in warmer climates. But because of these cold upwellings, you can have both species. And it works the same with the penguins. The penguins usually like the colder environments, but with the cold upwellings, they can survive in a place like the Galapagos. So it really is a unique place to visit.
Okay, Tristan?
What are the invasive species doing to the environment?
Oh, that's an awesome question. I'm going to pick a couple examples to tell you about. So one example was when ships would come to the island, they'd release rats unintentionally, and so they get on the islands and they'd eat the bird eggs, or they'd eat the tortoise eggs, which is a big problem because if all the eggs are being eaten and there's no predators to eat the rats, then you're going to start losing a lot of the animals. Goats were also released onto the islands and eating a lot of the greenery, which was food for the tortoises. So basically large parts of islands like Isabela were being turned into deserts because all the food was being eaten by the goats, thousands of goats, and there was nothing for the tortoises. So they enacted a huge conservation program, a massive program to wipe the goats off a lot of the islands. And they've been successful on several islands, and most of Isabela, they've managed to wipe out the goats. And what they're seeing is that the natural plant life is coming back and the tortoises are doing much better. And then one more example is this tiny, tiny little fly. And this fly got onto the islands, and it attacks the nests of little birds called mangrove finches. And it's such a problem that they're down to about 20 breeding pairs of these birds. That's it. And the flies land, they lay the eggs in the nostrils of the birds. And so they feed in there. And then when the flies get a bit bigger, they hide out under the nest. And then at night, they'll come out and they'll feed on the skin of the birds. And they'll actually end up killing them in most cases. So the Charles Darwin Research Foundation has an amazing project on the go right now where they're hand rearing mangrove finches to boost their populations back in the wild. And at the same time, they're rearing these flies in captivity to find a way to eliminate them without hurting any of the native species. So it's a massive project where they're trying to protect the native species and at the same time get rid of the invasive species that don't belong. And those are just a couple little examples. There's many more examples from plants that have been brought to other species that have been released on the islands, like dogs and cats, that they're working really hard to try and eliminate them from those islands. So that was a great question. It was a good question to end off on. And actually, I almost forgot we have Mrs. Amore's class joining us in Texas. Whew, close one. I'm glad I didn't forget. They're in San Antonio and they're a grade 4 class. So if you guys have a couple questions, you get the last questions.
Yay! I'm so glad to have you back.
Well, it's good to be back. It's a busy summer, but it's fun to be doing this again.
Okay, real quick questions because I know everybody's had their turn. Go, stand up, ask your question. Oh, by the way, this is International Dot Day, so my kids have dots all over them.
All right, fair enough.
Okay, ask
Happy International Dot Day.
Huh? Yeah.
Have you seen any Galapagos penguins?
You know, I was very lucky. It was looking like it wasn't going to happen. We visited Isabella, which you're supposed to have a really good chance to see them, and we didn't see any. And then we were, which island was it? It must have been Santiago, and we were snorkeling and didn't see any. And we were on our way back to the boat with the Zodiacs, and we spotted 2 on shore. So we pulled up with the Zodiacs to get a closer look, and they held still for about a minute before they got a little nervous and they both jumped into the water and swam away. So it was looking really likely that I wasn't going to see them, but we got lucky right at the end of the snorkel.
Joe, guess what his name is?
Is it Joe?
Santiago.
Oh, wow. Very cool. That's quite a coincidence.
One more, real quick, ask him another question.
Did you ever expect to go to the Galapagos?
Stay there.
You know, I knew one day I would go. It's obviously very expensive. It's a little bit tough to get to because it is so far away, and the only way to really visit and appreciate the islands is on a ship. But to have this opportunity to join National Geographic and Lindblad Expedition was really a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So absolutely amazing. And what was I going to say? It definitely surprised me, and it just seemed like everything kind of fell together. Out of all the places I could have been sent on this experience, it happened to be the Galapagos. And yeah, I knew I'd get there one day. I just didn't know how for sure. And growing up, I read National Geographic like crazy, and that helped inspire me to study science in university and become a science teacher. So it made it that extra bit special to take part in this with National Geographic. And Lindblad Expeditions is another amazing company. And the way they teach conservation, and their naturalists were so knowledgeable, and the care, you know, they give back so much to the people in the areas that they have expeditions, and to the conservation work that goes on in those areas. So an absolute treat to be with both of those companies. So great questions. Thank you so much, guys. I want to thank everybody for hanging out and joining me today. I know it's a little different than what we were expecting first thing in the morning, but I hope you guys learned a little bit about the Galapagos, and I hope there's some students out there who want to visit in the future. So any questions, your teachers can obviously send me an email. Keep an eye on the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants website, because we're going to post lots of pictures and videos and 360 images as I have a chance to edit them. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn on the microphones. I'm going to give everybody a chance to say goodbye before we log out for today. So here we go.
Bye.
Microphone's coming on. All right. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the weekend coming up, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski.